Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. I welcome you all to the 17th lecture on the course Management, Organizational Policies and Practices. Let's have a recap of lecture 16 before we start with the contents of today's lecture. In the lecture 16, we discussed that what is perception and why the perception is important, what are the different factors that influence the individual's perceptions, and we discussed it with reference to the attribution theory, that how individuals attribute others' behaviors, others' certain actions, attitudes to various internal and external factors. Then we had a discussion on the errors and biases in attributions. We also saw the frequently used shortcuts in judging others, such as the selective perception, the halo effect. We discussed contrast effect, we discussed projection, stereotyping. Then we also had a discussion of specific implications in organizations of the employment interview, the performance expectations, ethnic profiling, performance evaluations. Then we had a discussion on the link between perceptions and individual decision making, and we also had a discussion on the assumptions of the rational decision making model. We discussed the three components of creativity, common biases and errors, and intuition. We discussed individual differences in decision making, organizational constraints on decision making, and cultural differences in decision making. And we also had a discussion on ethics and decision making, ways to improve decision making. So these were all the different topics that we had a very elaborate discussion during our lecture 16, and we had a discussion on all these areas very in great detail. I gave you a number of examples to elaborate on all the different areas on perceptions and individual decision making. So for today's lecture, we'll be discussing the influences on employee behavior. What you can expect in today's lecture is first I'll be telling you the model of employee behavior, then we'll discuss the major categories of employee behavior, the external influences on employee behavior. We'll also discuss the factors in the external environment and the factors in the work environment, that how do they influence the employee behavior. Then we'll be discussing the internal factors that influence the employee behavior, and internal factors are the attitudes, the knowledge, skills and abilities. Okay, so this was the lecture outline, and we start with the lecture now. Major purpose of human resource development, of course the managers, they need to understand that why human resource development is there, what purpose it can serve, and how it can affect the employee attitudes, how it can influence employee behaviors, in what ways it can influence, and in what ways it can it can make the employee behavior or mold the employee behavior in the directions that are desirable for the management and for the organization, and that can help achieve the organizational objectives, and that can align the individual efforts with the organizational goals. So a major goal of HRD interventions is to assist employees and organizations in achieving their goals. HRD professionals help employees by designing and developing programs that promote individual development. HRD also improves organizational performance, and other goal of HRD interventions is an effort to change employee behavior, as I told you. Then HRD provides skills and behaviors to employees which assist in increasing their performance, which leads to great accomplishments. So the objectives of the HRD are to introduce such interventions which can bring desirable changes in employee behavior in a way that it becomes aligned with the organizational requirements. So there are two types of behavior if we classify the individual's behavior in the organizational terms. One is the task performance behavior, and the other one is the organizational citizenship behavior. If I elaborate a little further on these two types of behaviors, task performance behavior is the performance or the behavior of the individual that how he performs his task, that is specific to the task, the contents of the task, the contents of the job specifications or the job description that the individual has, right? So what he is supposed to do on job, whether he is doing that or not, or how he is performing on that job. So that is the task performance, right? And the organizational citizenship behavior, that is the extra effort that is exerted by the individual, which is that is not the extra effort, but that is the extra role effort that is exerted by the individual, right? So the task performance is the in-role behavior, and organizational citizenship behavior is the extra role behavior. And by extra role behavior, we mean that individual performs the tasks which do not fall under the job description of the employee, but he is still performing those tasks. So that is the extra role behavior, such as the helping behavior shown by the individual. Like he's trying to help his co-workers achieve, he has done his task and he wants to co-worker, or he helps his co-worker with his task, right? Or he's helping his co-worker solve some problems, or offering some solutions, right? So all these kinds of behaviors, they are the helping behaviors, and the individual by his job description, he is not required to perform them, but he is still performing them, right? So this is the organizational citizenship behavior. Then there are the different forces that influence the employee behavior, which are, as I told you, that there are certain forces that are external to the employee, and there are certain forces that are internal to the employee. So here we are basically going to discuss how the external factors and how the internal factors, they influence the employee's behavior. So we see that in the external environment, there are a number of factors such as the economic conditions, the laws, the regulations, etc., that affect the employee's behavior. For example, if the economic conditions, there is downturn in the economy, right, and as a result, there is the demand for products of the organization that has fallen short, right. As a result, there is pressure on the on the company to stay cost effective, and because it cannot make as much sales because of the downturn, so it also needs to reduce its costs, and it can enter into the layoffs, right? It can lay off the employees. So this is the effect of these economic laws on the environment. And then there are certain laws and regulations that can also influence the employees. For example, in the Japanese law, you cannot once you hire an employee, you cannot lay off that employee. The layoffs are very difficult, right? So this is how the laws and regulations are affecting the policies and the employment policies in the organizations in there. Then in the work environment, there are a number of factors that can influence the employee behavior, such as the supervisor, the quality of your relationship with your supervisor, the organization itself, how you perceive the organization, how you perceive the support from the organization. Do you perceive it supportive or you don't perceive it supportive? Then your co-workers, how do they influence? They all have an influence on the performance of the employee. And then within the employee, the factors are the motivation of the employees, that why he wants to perform, how he wants to perform, right? And the attitudes of the employees, their abilities, their knowledge, and their skills, right? So let's have a discussion on all these in detail. So here we have a model for the factors that are influencing the employee behavior in the external environment, and we see that these are the economic conditions. There are technological changes. If the technology changes, for example, if it becomes very much there's huge innovation and information technology spread, and as a result the organization becomes very much automated, then what effect it has on the employees. One, thus the older employees, their skills, they might become obsolete, right, and they might become redundant, and the other influence can be that these employees, when they become redundant, they might be laid off from the organization. So that is the effect of the technological changes that can affect the employees. Their skills, they might become obsolete, right? And then there are changes in the labor market conditions that can also influence the employees' behavior within the organizations, whether the labor market is tight or the labor market is loose. Then the laws and regulations at the governmental level, and there are certain international laws, then there are the governmental laws, then there are labor unions, and how do they affect the employee behavior. Then we saw that the supervision that affects the employee behavior. So the leadership, what kind of leadership the employee has, that directly determines employee behavior. Then what are the performance expectations of the leader. Then from the organization, a number of factors such as the reward structures, culture, job design. And from the co-workers, their norms, the group work, the group dynamics, the teamwork, they all have an influence on employee behavior. So how do they influence employee behavior? They first, if they impact the employee's motivation, its attitudes, knowledge, skills and abilities, and as a result that affects the employee's behavior in the form of task performance and organizational citizenship behaviors, so which results in the personal and organizational outcomes. So this is the this is how the environment is basically affecting the employee's behavior. And now let's have a discussion on these different factors that are influencing the employee behavior in a little bit more detail. About the external environment, I gave you an example that how the layoffs that they can influence the employees, and they can even influence the survivors when certain layoff takes place in the organization as a result of the external economic downturn, or as a result of the technological shift, and some of the employees becoming obsolete or redundant. Then that if survivors, it has a very negative effect on the survivors in terms of their motivation, which is lost, and they start feeling more insecure, right, from the organization, and they tend to be more dissatisfied with the organization as well, and their turnover intentions also increase. So there are a number of influences in terms of these organizational policies even for the survivors. So HRD must advise organizations, they must invest and train the survivors of the downsizing on how to carry out their responsibilities after downsizing, and help them in retaining rather than layoff, right? So this HRD has a number of, or the management, it has a number of things it can do to restore the confidence of the survivors, such as providing them the trainings, or so that to make them so much employable that they can survive the layoffs in the future as well. Then there are other factors in the work environment, such as the outcomes, the supervision and leadership, and organization and co-workers. So let's have a discussion on these one by one. First one is the personal outcomes, which are those that value to the individual, such as pay, recognition or reward that you are getting. So if you are satisfied with those personal outcomes, such as the pay you are getting, the recognition or rewards you are getting, of course that is going to influence your behavior positively. The organizational outcomes are things valued by the organization, such as the teamwork, the productivity or quality. So if the organization is showing good quality, good productivity and good returns, then it is going to positively influence employee behavior as well, because that better productivity at the part of the organization is going to trickle down to the employee as well, and the employee is going to exhibit the positive behavior. So employee perceptions of outcomes are important determinants of employee behavior. So it is the perceptions of the employees that are more important. If the employee perceives that he's getting positive personal and organizational outcomes, then his behavior would also be influenced positively. But if his perceptions are not positive, then it will not lead to positive outcomes. How the outcomes they can influence the employee behavior, we discussed in one of our lectures the different theories of motivation, and we'll be again very briefly referring back to those theories. I'll not go into detail of those theories, just referring to those theories to show that how different the different motivation theories, what they state that how employee behavior is influenced by the different outcomes, such as the expectancy theory. It's which states that the employees, they will perform behaviors that they perceive will bring value added. If they expect that there will be some outcome from certain behavior that they perform, and that outcome is value to them as well, only then they will perform that behavior. And from the equity theory as well, which states that the outcomes, they are evaluated by comparing them to the outcomes received by others. You make input-output ratio comparisons with the referent others, and then you behave accordingly. So if you perceive that there is inequity in your input-output ratio compared to the referent other, then you will be your behavior will be negatively influenced, and so on. I give you a number of different situations that can arise as a result of the perceived equity or inequity by the employee. Okay, the supervisor and the leaders, they are one of the big determinants of employee behavior. They really are big antecedents of employee behavior. We also had a discussion on self-fulfilling prophecy, which says that in which the Pygmalion effect operates, and which describes that how the expectations of a survivor, they can influence the behavior of a subordinate. So when your supervisor, he expects you to perform very good, or he sets very high targets for you, and he expects that you will achieve those targets, that's why he's giving you tough goals, then you also put in more effort and hard work to achieve that goal, and you achieve more. But if he gives you very low targets and low goals, or he expects you to do less, then you will actually end up doing less, right? So that is a self-fulfilling prophecy, and that is the role of the supervisor, that how he influences your behavior. If he sets for you difficult goals, you will put in more effort to achieve those goals. So how the supervisors, what approach of leadership they use, that also influences the employee behavior. As we know that leadership is the use of non-coercive influence to direct and coordinate the activities of a group towards accomplishing a goal. We'll be discussing more about the leadership, the different leadership styles, but we know that how the transformational leaders, for example, how they influence the employee behavior very positively by inculcating in them the necessary motivations, and by helping them identify with with their tasks, and helping them identify with the organization and thinking bigger, right? And owning the organization and the goals of the organization, understanding the vision of the organization, and trying to act upon ways, putting in extra effort in, and putting in ways, and even beyond their personal interests, helping the people work to achieve the organizational outcomes. So this is what the transformational leaders do, and this is how they influence the employees' behavior. So leadership has a greater influence on employee behavior as well. Then we have the leader-member exchange theory, which suggests that supervisors, they tend to develop different quality relationships with their subordinates. So some supervisors, they develop good quality relationships with their subordinates, and not so good quality relationships with some other subordinates. So and we categorize them as in-groupers, with which the subordinates with which the supervisors form good quality relations, and the out-groupers with which the relationships are not that good. So the in-groupers, they receive better tasks from the supervisors. They trust, the supervisors trust the in-groupers more, so they give them more challenging tasks. They give them more difficult goals, because they trust them more that they will be they will be performing better, and they are more capable of achieving those goals. And they also give them better resources, to, both tangible and intangible, in the form of recognition and rewards. And they enjoy a number of benefits, the subordinates who are in the in-groupers list. And the ones who are in the out-groupers, they do not receive that much benefits and that much resources from the supervisors, and they also do not receive that good tasks from the supervisors, right? So as a result, the in-groupers, they tend to perform better, and the out-groupers, they don't, they are reported not to perform that good. This is how this is also an extension of this leadership theory, which says that how the leader behavior, or how the relationship of the leader with the supervisor, of the leader with the subordinate, how it influences the subordinate's behavior. If you have good quality relationship with your supervisor, your outcomes, in terms of your behavioral outcomes, your organizational outcomes, and the personal outcomes, they're going to be different than if you're not that good terms with your supervisor. Then there are a number of organizational influences, such as the reward structure and the organizational structure. The reward structure is that how you are making the tangible rewards to the employees, right, and how you're making the intangible rewards to the employees in the form of the number of trainings that you're providing to the employees, and how those trainings are distributed, right, what is the quality of those trainings, the recognition that you're giving to your employees for the good work or the hard work that they have done, and the acceptance that you have for the employees. So these are all the tangible and intangible benefits that the employees receive from the organization, and of course we all understand that they influence the employee behavior significantly. Then the organizational culture, the kind of culture organization has, it has its influences on the employee behavior, such as the organizations different organizations can have a number of different cultures. Some organization can be very adaptive, some can be very innovative, very creative, and some can be risk-averse organizations, some can be flexible organizations, and some are the bureaucratic organizations, and we have the mechanistic organizations. So there are a number of organizational types and the number of organizational structures, and a number of organizational cultures, and these different cultures, they have different norms and different values, and they influence employee behaviors differently, right? So we'll be talking more about organizational culture in one of our next lectures. Then we see that the job design, it also has a great influence on the employee behavior, and I had a discussion detailed, I told you in one of the lectures on the motivation, that how the job design influences the employee behavior, how it helps formulate the motivational orientations of the employees, and how that influences the employee outcomes, such as the autonomy you have in the job, the feedback that you get from your job, right, and the significance that you have of the job, and the task significance, the scope of your job, and the responsibilities, and the degree to which you're empowered in doing certain work in your job, and so on. So a number of areas on which design your job, how rich they are, they will also determine the employee's behavior, right? So we see that how the co-workers, they influence the employee behavior. So there are a number of ways. One, through the norms, the informal rules for appropriate behavior which are established within a group, right? There are certain group expectations that this is the right way of doing things and this is the wrong way of doing things, and those norms, they influence your behavior. You tend to work according to those group norms, right? Because if you don't work accordingly, then the other co-workers, they might criticize you, and if you do work accordingly, then they may appreciate you. Then the trust and cohesiveness that is in the group, that is a sense of togetherness and willingness to remain as part of the group. So that is important, and that is which is an important criteria of teamwork. So that also influences the employee's behavior. We also discussed that different concepts related to this teamwork, such as that groupthink and the cohesiveness in the group, that how much cohesive the group is, and how much and how the groupthink can influence the employee behavior. Then we see that motivation, the effect of the motivation, and how it determines the employee's behavior. And we are again going to just discuss it very shortly here. I have a number of motivation theories here for you, but I'm not going to discuss them in detail for you. There are motivation characteristics. First, what motivation does is that it energizes the effort, and it directs the effort, and it helps in the persistence of the effort. You continue the effort, and we discussed all this in very much detail in our previous lectures. So motivation is basically critical to human resource development, because success of many human resource development programs and processes, they depends on in part on whether individuals, they are motivated to participate, learn, and use what is learned to improve performance. So if the individual is, for example, the organization, it offers a training program, but the employees, they are not motivated to learn, then if you make that training mandatory, if they're not motivated to learn, you cannot inculcate that motivation in those employees, and then they may not actually learn anything out there in that training, and they may not apply anything that they have learned to improve their performance later on. So the motivation is very important of the employees, and has greater influences. Then we had a discussion on the Maslow's need hierarchy theory, that how a set of different levels of needs on the hierarchy the individual has, and how he tries to satisfy those needs, and he cannot move to the next slot before he satisfies the previous one. Then we had a discussion on the Herzberg's theory, where we discussed the different hygiene factors, and we discussed the different motivational factors that influence the employees, and we saw that how Herzberg suggests that jobs should be enriched rather than enlarged to gain better employee behaviors. We discussed that how the jobs, they can be enriched, and how the jobs, they can be enlarged. What is the difference between the two, and how job enrichment is can lead to better employee satisfaction, better autonomy, and better they can do their work, they can improve their performance and productivity in better ways. and what are the different implications of these different motivational theories. We also had a discussion of their limitations and their implications. Then we had a discussion of about the cognitive theories of motivation, such as the expectancy theory, the goal setting theory, the social learning theory, the equity theory, and the self-determination theory. And we had a discussion that how all these different theories, they influence the employees' behavior and the employees' outcomes. They basically explain that how the employee is motivated towards different factors, how their motivations develop, and how they influence their outcomes. If I just move forward, I just explained to you expectancy theory a little bit again, and about the goal setting theory, as I told you earlier, that it's about the setting of the goals, that the difficult goals you set which will lead to higher performance. Then we discussed the social learning theory, which was in which the concept of self-efficacy, which was given by Bandura, and I gave you told you already the different determinants of this self-efficacy. And we saw that there are different predictions of the theories, that expectations, they undermine whether a behavior will be performed, how much effort will be expended, and how long you will perform the behavior. Then we had a discussion on the equity theory, and I just explained it to you again. So in the equity theory, there are certain implications for human resource development, because since the employees, they make comparisons with the referent others, so the HRD interventions should be designed that the managers, they should be aware and they should be concerned with for example, if they have to select a few individuals for training, on what basis they have made those selections for training, because the individuals who have not been selected for a training, they may perceive the unfairness treatment, and as a result their behavior will be negatively influenced. Then we also had a discussion on the reinforcement theory, that how it explains that employee behavior is regulated through reinforcements. If the employee performs nice, reinforce positively by recognizing the performance of the employee, for example, and if he is not performing well, then give him negative enforcement by discouraging the employee or by punishing the employee in one way or the other, right? So and as a result, the employee will not tend to repeat that behavior in future. Then we had a discussion on we basically discussed the cognitive evaluation theory in one of our previous motivation lectures, and self-determination theory is an extension of that cognitive evaluations theory, right? This theory basically, again, it also divides the motivation into the continuum of external and internal motivation. It also gives the concept of a motivation. It says basically that the motivation is, one is the autonomous motivation and the other one is the controlled motivation. And the theory basically says that the motivation of the employees, it flourishes in the presence of the autonomy that you give to the employees, the feelings of competence that they have, and the need of relatedness, that how much they are involved in the relationships with the significant others in the organization, such as the management. And the theory basically divided the externally motivated or the autonomous regulation into the external regulation, in which which is contingent on rewards or punishments, and the motivation is totally controlled here, and the introjected regulation, where self-worth contingent on performance, and the identified regulation, where importance of goals and values and its moderately autonomous motivation. So the implications of this theory and the cognitive evaluations theory for the HRD are that the training programs, they need to realize where at the continuum of motivation the employee lies, whether he is controlled on controlled motivation, which is also the external motivation, or whether he's on the autonomous motivation, which is the internal motivation or the intrinsic motivation, right? So if the individual is lying on the intrinsic motivation continuum, he needs to be treated differently for achieving better outcomes, and if he's on the external motivation continuum or on the controlled regulation or controlled motivation, then he has to be treated differently for the optimum outcomes. So motivation is of course critical to human resource development. Its success depends of many human resource development programs and processes, in part whether individuals are motivated to participate, learn and use what is learned in the trainings, for example. So I already explained this to you earlier. Then we have the attitudes, that a person's general positive or negative feelings towards a person, place, thing, event or idea. They tend to be very stable and hard to change. So the attitudes are important in training. For example, does the trainee intend to use the training or ignore it? Right, so if you have the positive attitude or you have the negative attitude, and these attitudes, as we see, that they are stable and they hardly tend to change. Why it is important to study the attitudes? Because attitudes, they determine the employee behavior. So attitudes also have the influence on employee behavior, right? So they combine with perceived social pressure to form intentions, right? So this means that attitudes, they do not directly predict the employee behavior, but their influence is through the intentions, right? So first, the attitudes of the employees, they translate into their intentions, and those intentions then translate into the employee behavior. For example, just to clarify this thing, if you are confused, if an employee, he is not satisfied with his job, so job satisfaction or job dissatisfaction is the attitude, right? And it will translate into organizational turnover. He will leave the organization, but before actually leaving the organization, it will turn into intentions. He will intend to leave the organization. So job dissatisfaction will lead to turnover intentions by the employee. He will make a plan, and he will make a mind that he wants to leave the organization, right? So he has not behaved actually, he has just made up his mind, he is intended to leave the organization, and for that he will start looking for different opportunities in the labor market, right? Or he will start applying or using his references or his contacts and using other number of information channels and the channels of his contacts to get a job elsewhere. And as a result, he will, when he finds another job, he will actually quit the organization. So that actual turnover would be the behavior of the employee, and so it is coming from the attitude of the employee, which is job dissatisfaction, and it is resulting in the behavior of the employee, which is turnover, and it is mediated by the intentions of the individual, the turnover intentions of the individual. Reactions to feedback or other employee attitudes, they can have implications for HRD interventions such as training and career programs. Of course, how the individuals, they react to these trainings and these career programs, that has an influence on the employee attitudes. Then the knowledge, skills and abilities. We see that these knowledge, skills and abilities, they greatly influence the employee's behavior actually. So we have till now we have discussed that how the organizational factors, they influence the employee behavior, how the supervisor affects the employee behavior, and we have the discussion on how the other than the supervisor and the different organizational factors which are influencing the employee behavior, how the co-worker influences the employee behavior, and how the factors in the external environment, they influence the employee behavior. So now we'll see that how the internal factors, they influence the employee behavior. The factors that we have discussed till now, they are basically the factors in the external environment, and now we see that how the individual factors they influence their employees' behavior, their knowledge, their skills and their abilities. So abilities, they are the general capacities which are related to performance of the specific tasks, and skills, they combine abilities and capabilities which are developed through training programs, etc. So skills are developed through the trainings, and the abilities, they are the general capacities to perform specific jobs. And the knowledge is the understanding of the factors or principles related to a subject, specific subject. HRD programs, they mostly focus on changing skills and knowledge, right? So abilities, you have a certain level of abilities, the specific level of abilities which you have related to the performance of the job, and the skills, they can be learned. So and similar is the knowledge, which is which can also be learned, that how the different, for example, you learn that how different process in an organization that takes place, how it carries on, and how it can be performed, different about the different objects, about the different machinery in the organization, about the different procedures in the organization. So even if an employee has a lot of knowledge in one area, is an expertise in one area, when he, for example, goes to another organization, he still has to adapt himself, or he still has to learn the different procedures, the different SOPs in that organization, and different ways of doing the same task in that organization, which he has been doing differently in another organization. So this is how you need to gain some skills, and you need to gain some knowledge of performing that task. So HRD's task is to provide that those skills and that knowledge to the employees to perform those tasks. So we see that the attitudes, they basically have three different components. One is the cognitive component, which is the opinion or belief segment of an attitude, and the affective component is the emotional segment or the of an attitude, and the behavioral component is the intention to behave in a certain way toward someone or something. As I told you, giving the examples of the attitudes, that one is the job satisfaction, a collection of the positive and or negative feelings that an individual holds towards his or her job. It explains that how satisfied or how dissatisfied you are with your job. Job satisfaction, there are a number of measures which have been developed by different authors to measure the job satisfaction. Some they use this one item measure of job satisfaction, which is saying that whether you are satisfied, are you satisfied with your job? Yes or no. You have to answer, or you have to answer on a Likert scale. But in the there are a number of facets of job satisfaction, such as the satisfaction with the supervisor, satisfaction with the co-worker, and satisfaction with your task, satisfaction with your customers, and satisfaction with the organizational higher management of the organization, satisfaction with the pays, satisfaction with the rewards, right, and satisfaction with the amount of recognition that you get from the organization, and satisfaction of your relationship quality with your supervisor, and satisfaction with the number of work hours, and etc. So number of work conditions, about the different job characteristics, about the job design, right, about the outcomes that you're receiving in both in the intrinsic and in the extrinsic terms. All these areas, they are basically covered under the job satisfaction, which is the job satisfaction measure, which is a detailed measures of the job satisfaction, such as we have the job satisfaction questionnaire. So there are a number of approaches to measure the job satisfaction, right, and it has been stated that a job satisfaction measure is more appropriate, which uses more than one item in the job satisfaction scale, right, because there are, of course, the different facets of job satisfaction, and only asking the employee whether you are satisfied or you're not satisfied, that may not truly measure the job satisfaction of the employees, but you need to gauge in, the employee's satisfaction on a number of different areas. So an employee, for example, he might be very much satisfied with his supervisor, but he may not at all be satisfied with his co-workers. So overall he might be satisfied with his job, because he considers his supervisor to be more significant other, and his level of satisfaction with the supervisor is much more than his level of dissatisfaction with his co-worker. Then we have this, so we aggregate all these different areas and come up with a aggregate measure of or aggregate score on job satisfaction. Then we have the job involvement, which is identifying with the job, actively participating in it, and considering performance important to self-worth. The degree to which you are involved in doing your task, the degree to which you are identifying with your task, that is the job involvement. So the more you're involved in your job, the more you think that that job is worth for you to perform in. Then we have the organizational commitment, which is identifying with a particular organization and its goals and wishing to maintain membership in the organization. So organizational commitment is an employee attitude wherein the employee, he wants to remain a member in the organization, or where his turnover intentions are lower. So when an employee is said to be committed with the organization, when he wishes to stay in the organization and he does not want to leave the organization, and he also identifies with the organization. Then we have a number of different dimensions of organizational commitment. These dimensions, multi-dimensional organizational commitment, it was basically given by Allen and Meyer. He basically made this contribution to this research on organizational commitment by stating that it is not unidimensional, but it is a multi-dimensional construct, and it has the three dimensions. One, the affective commitment, which is the emotional attachment of the employee with his organization. So emotional attachment refers to means that the employee wants to stay in the organization because an employee is staying in the organization because he wants to stay in the organization. So that is because he is emotionally attached with the organization, and that is why he does not want to leave the organization. Normative commitment is an employee staying in the organization because he feels that he should stay in the organization. Right, so he does not want to, but he feels that he should stay, or he ought to stay in the organization. That is why he's staying in the organization. So there can be a number of factors which make an employee feel that he should stay in the organization, such as the level of socialization that he has done with the organization. So that can have, and in fact the networks that he has established in the organization, and the investments that the organization has made in the employee, or the favors that the organization has lent to the employee, or the other culture and norms of the employee's organization, or of the individual's personal, or in coming from his family or his person. For example, if the employee's father, he worked in an organization for 30 years and then he retired, so his father inculcates the values of organizational commitment to his son as well. Right, so he's stating to his son that you should stay loyal with your organization. That is the norms that employee is getting from his family. Right, so he feels that it is his obligation to stay with the organization. That is why he stays with it. Then we have this continuance commitment, which is related to the different costs that are associated if you leave the organization. So the continuance commitment is basically one. There are a number of costs that the employees perceive that he has to incur if he leaves the organization, and these costs can be in terms of the trainings that the individual has got from the organization. So those skills, the trainings might be on the specific skills within the organization, and those trainings and those skills will be lost if the employees goes to another organization. Right, and then there can be other number of organizational investments that have been made, the organization has made on the employee, and you feel that you will be lost on all those investments and all those trainings if you quit that organization. And this continuance commitment also depends upon the opportunities that you have in the external labor market. If you have more opportunities in the external labor market, then you will be more attracted towards those opportunities, or your chances or your continuance commitment then will be lower. But if you have few alternatives in the external labor market, then your continuance commitment will be higher. So the continuance commitment depends upon the perceived alternatives and the different costs which are associated with leaving the current organization. If those costs are higher of leaving the current organization, such as you might be losing on your pensions and on other benefits that that will be lost if you leave the organization, right? So that is also a cost that you have to pay. Then you have developed very good relationships with your co-workers, with your supervisors. That is also a cost, that if you leave the organization you will lose on all those relationships, and you have to go to a new place and you have to establish yourself once again among your peers and among your supervisors and your managers, right? So that these are all the different costs that the employee incurs if he leaves the organization, and he has to make a calculation. If those costs are very high, then his continuance commitment will also be high, right? If those costs are low, his continuance commitment will be lower, so he'll have greater tendency to leave the organization. And same goes for the alternatives. If the alternatives are higher in the external market, then the continuance commitment will be lower, but if the alternatives are lower, then the continuance commitment will be higher. Before coming to explaining to you these next concepts, I tell you a little more about this different dimensions of the commitment. According to Allen and Meyer, different individuals, they can have different levels of all these three types of commitment. So some employees, they might be very high in effective commitment, but they might be very low in continuance and normative commitment. So it would mean that those employees, they are they have emotional bonding with the organization, and only because of that emotional bonding they are staying with the organization, although they don't feel that they don't feel any obligation to stay in the organization, or they don't have high continuous commitment with the organization, but they have high emotional commitment, right? And similarly we can see that in some employees, they may not have any emotional attachment with the organization, and their continuance commitment may also be lower, but they might be feeling that it is an obligation for them to stay in the organization, and that is why they are staying in the organization, right? And same goes for the continuance commitment. The other two forms of commitment, they might be very much lower, but the continuance commitment might be very higher, and that might be leading an employee to stay in the organization. And it can be the other way as well. It can be a combination of all those three, those three or two of these three dimensions of commitment. The individuals can be high on emotional and normative commitment and low on continuance. They can be moderately high on all three, moderately low on all those three, and so on. There can be different combinations, right? And the research shows that effective commitment, out of all these three dimensions of commitment, that is the strongest indicator of employees' behaviors. So strongest influence on employee behavior is coming from the effective commitment of the employee with the organization. So the individuals who are emotionally attached to the organization, they have the highest determinant of the employee's turnover. So if you are emotionally attached to the organization, chances are that you will not leave the organization. But if you are normatively committed with the organization, then chances are not that high that you will not leave the organization. So the relationship of these three dimensions of commitment is stronger for the effective commitment with the turnover compared to the other two dimensions of commitment. And continuance, same goes for the continuance and the normative commitment. Then if I tell you a little more about this, they're related to the organizational commitment. A number of different scientists and researchers, they found that an individual can be committed not only with the organization, but he can be committed with the different facets, such as the individual can be committed with the job. The individual can be committed with the supervisors. The individual can be committed with the professions in which he is in, and the individual can be committed with the top management, right? So he said that it's not only the commitment with the organization, but with all these all these different areas. So there are some individuals, they may not be committed with their organization, but they might be very much committed with their supervisors, right? And they might be staying in the organization only because of their commitment with their supervisor. And some individuals, they might be very much committed with their jobs, but not with the organization, right? And some individuals, they can be committed with their professions, with their occupations, but not with their organizations, right? And not with their supervisors or any other entity. If we if I give you an example on this, that if there is a doctor, right, and he is very much committed with medicine, which is his occupation, right? He works in a hospital. It is possible that he is not satisfied with that hospital, he is not that committed with the hospital, but he is committed with his profession, right? He is committed with medicine. So what he will do is that he might be leaving the organization and finding another organization where he can advance his career, where he can advance in his profession, right? So because he is committed with his profession, with his occupation, right? So that is the occupational commitment. So here the individual is committed with the occupation but not with the organization, right? And so this kind of commitment often you can see in the case of the professionals, high professionals who really want to advance their career, and the individuals who are highly educated and who are highly professionals, they basically are more seen to be more committed with their occupations, with their professions, than with the organizations. And we could also see that these kind of individuals also tend to turn more organizations, turn more jobs in order to advance their careers, while the employees who are not professionals and who are low skilled employees and who are less educated employees, they tend to be more committed with their organizations and but not with their occupations. They don't have that much aspirations for their occupational advancements, right? So here I made an important point that commitment, it can be towards the different entities, and the commitment with all those different entities has a number of different outcomes, right? So organizational commitment outcomes, they are different from the outcomes of the commitment of the employee with the supervisor, right? Or from the commitment of the employee with the profession, with the occupation, right? If you're committed with your occupation, your occupational turnover intentions will be lower. If you're committed with your organization, your organizational turnover intentions will be lower, and so on. Then we have the perceived organizational support, which is the degree to which employees, they feel the organization cares about their well-being. So it is the perceptions of the employees about how caring the organization is towards the employees. So if the individuals perceive that the organization is very much caring towards them, then it will influence their behaviors very much positively. And if it perceives that the organization is not caring towards them, it is not supportive towards them, it does not take care of them in terms of their own goals, their own aspirations, their own progression, right? Then the individuals will have the negative influence on their behavior. Then the employee engagement, which is the individual's involvement with satisfaction with and enthusiasm for the organization. How much engaged you are, how much involved you are, and how much satisfied you are with the organization, and then how much amount of input you give to your work. That also is determined from the employee's engagement. So how vigorous you are in performing your tasks, how dedicated you are in performing your tasks, and how absorbed you are in performing your task. These three are the different dimensions of the employee work engagement that has been advanced in the literature. And the literature says that if the individuals who are engaged in their organizations or in their tasks, they are those who are vigorous, who are absorbed in doing their activity, and who are dedicated in doing their activity. So the engaged employees, they also turn out to be better employees, right? They show a number of positive behaviors in the form of better performance, task performance, better organizational citizenship behaviors, and these employees also tend to show lower turnover intentions. They also tend to be more innovative at the workplace. So the employee attitudes, we see that how the attitudes, they are influencing the employee behaviors, right? Through their influence on the intentions of the employees, right? So there are a number of ways that how you can gauge and how you can measure the attitudes of the employees. One of the ways that is most commonly used by the organizations is by the attitudinal surveys. So it is eliciting responses from employees through questionnaires about how they feel about their jobs, work group supervisors, and the organization. So on a number of different dimensions in the organization, you ask the employees different questions by way of the questionnaire, and then try to know what they say about those surveys, which we also call the employee satisfaction surveys. Different organizations, they conduct such surveys on annual basis. Even the organizations conduct these satisfaction surveys. Here I would like to say that these employment satisfaction surveys, other than conducting these types of surveys to check the employee attitudes, it might be also beneficial for the organization to conduct the exit interviews from the employees who are leaving the organization, because sometimes these attitudinal surveys that we get filled from the employees are not very much candid in their opinion upon the organizational policies and upon the different factors in the organization which are satisfying or dissatisfying them, right? Because the employees are sometimes they're reserved, they want to stay reserved in their opinion, and they are afraid of the confidentiality of the information, and that's why they are not giving they are not portraying the true picture in these surveys, right? But the employees who are exiting, they might be very candid in their opinion, they might be very frank, and they might tell the organization that what are the different policies on which the organization needs to improve, or how they are affecting the employees and their behaviors, right? So as I told you earlier, that the job satisfaction, it is measured using the single global rating, or at the summation score, so wherein all the different dimensions of the employees' jobs are gathered. Then how satisfied are people with their jobs? In general, they are satisfied with their jobs. It depends upon the facets of the satisfaction. They tend to be less satisfied with pay and promotion opportunities. In general, people tend to be lesser satisfied with the pay and promotion, because that is the maybe the most important factor for the people, that what is the pay and what are the different promotion opportunities. A study shows that around after about $40,000 a year, there is no relationship between amount of pay and job satisfaction. So pay only up to a certain level influences the employee's job satisfaction, and this could lead us to we could refer to the Maslow's hierarchy theory of needs, which states that beyond a certain level, when your needs are satisfied, you move to the next level in the hierarchy of needs. So when you're satisfied, when you're getting the 40,000, maybe you're satisfied with your economic needs, and your social needs are being met, and you move above the continuum or above the hierarchy. Then personality, it can also influence the job satisfaction. So even if you have the two individuals who have the different personalities, and who have the same job characteristics, who have the same job design, who are working in the same organization in the similar capacities and earning the same amount of money, and same all the intangible benefits, one of the individuals, they might be satisfied and the other one might be dissatisfied with the organization, or owing to their different personalities, right? So certain people, they tend to be generally dissatisfied, they tend to be negative about the outcomes, about their surroundings, about themselves even, and compared to the other people. So those people, even if they have very conducive work environment, they won't be satisfied with the organization. So there are a number of ways when you are not satisfied with your organization, you can express that dissatisfaction. One is you just exit the organization, you leave the organization. Other one is you stay loyal with the organization. So you are passively waiting for the conditions to improve, and you want to stay loyal with the organization. Another way can be that you raise your voice. You say that, actively participate and try to make attempts to improve the conditions by raising your voice. And the other one is the neglect, wherein you are allowing the conditions to worsen. You say that, okay, let happen what is happening. Of course, satisfied workers, they are reported to be more productive compared to the workers who are not satisfied with their jobs, right? And satisfaction is also related to the absenteeism. The satisfied employees are reported to be less absent compared to the employees who are dissatisfied. And satisfaction is also related to turnover. Satisfied employees, they are less likely to quit compared to their counterparts. Then the organizations, they take actions to retain high performance and to weed out low performers. So satisfaction is also related to organizational citizenship behaviors. Employees who are satisfied with their jobs, they tend to be more engaged in the extra role behaviors and the helping behaviors, which I explained to you. And then the satisfaction is also related to the customer satisfaction. The more satisfied you are with your job, the more you'll have the ability and the capacity to deal with your customers with a smiling face and to satisfy with your customers. But if you're not happy with your job, you will give a damn to your customers, and that would be your last priority, to satisfy or to talk pleasantly with your customers and to go an extra way for your customers. So there are a number of things that we have done in this chapter. If we have in general, if we see that when we think of the attitudes and the organizations, we think of, if you have a number of categories and you have to choose an answer from these categories, what you will choose. When we think of attitudes in organizations, we think of job satisfaction, happiness, job involvement, mood at work, organizational commitment, 1 and 2, 1, 3 and 5, right? So of course, as I explained to you in my previous slides, that mood at work is not attitude. Similarly, happiness is not attitude. So it is the job satisfaction, it is job involvement, and it is organizational commitment, and the answer is 7. Then we have another one here, which says that Ernesto is known as the donut hut king. Every day he brings donuts and coffee to the office for everybody. He says it helps everyone think more clearly. Ernesto is demonstrating job satisfaction, organizational citizenship behavior, productivity, job involvement, or conscientiousness, right? It should be easier for you to again answer this, or to see why the answer is organizational citizenship behavior, because of course what he's doing is that he's bringing something in his office which is not part of his task, right, and it is not part of his job description. He's just doing it out of the way, or it is just an extra role behavior that he's performing, therefore it is the organizational citizenship behavior. Of course, it's not depicting his productivity, it is not his job involvement, it is not his conscientiousness, and it is not job satisfaction. So I would urge you to write down 3 things someone could do at work that would constitute organizational citizenship behavior, and then you compare your list with somebody else. That will help you think through what can be the different extra role behaviors that can be or that are performed in the organizations by the employees for their co-workers, right? So with this we come to an end of today's lecture. I hope it was an easy topic for you. Most of the things I just quickly went through those topics, some of the topics, because they were related to what we wanted to discuss here today, but we had discussed most of them in our previous lectures in some different contexts, but here we had to all include them in another context. So I just gave you an insight into how, for example, the different motivation theories, what they say about how the employee behavior is determined, on how the employee behavior is shaped and how it is influenced, right? Then we also discussed a number of job characteristics, the job design, which we had discussed earlier, but I told you that how it can influence the employee behavior, how it can translate or transform the employee behavior, right? And we had a discussion on a number of different factors that shape the employee behavior, and we saw that these are the factors in the external environment, these are the factors in the organization, the supervisor, the co-workers, and other factors in the general environment of the organization, such as the external environment, such as the economic and the technological factors, the labor unions, the laws and regulations, etc. How do they influence the employee behavior? And then how do the individual factors themselves, his own skills, knowledge and abilities, how do they influence the employee's behavior? And what are the different implications for managers or for the human resource department in the organization? How the human resource department, they can understand that how these different factors influence employee behavior, and then they can devise their management interventions accordingly, right? And we had a discussion that how different employees, they have different personalities sometimes, and that is why they are behaving in certain ways, and certain individuals, they are different in their personalities and they behave in certain other ways, right? And managers, they really need to understand all these nitty-gritties in the employees' behaviors, in the determinants of the employees' behavior, and they should devise their interventions accordingly. We also saw that there is no direct relationship between the employees' attitudes and the employees' behaviors, but these two relationships are linked through the mediating variables, which can be a number of which can be a number of intentions, such as the turnover intentions, organizational turnover intentions, or occupational turnover intentions, etc. So they basically mediate this relationship between the attitudes and the behaviors. So it was a very interesting topic, which has a great insights for the management and the devising of the organizational policy, because it really emphasizes on how the employee behavior influences the organizational outcomes, which can be very strategic for the organization in terms of the job performance, the organizational productivity, the individual productivity, the employees' engagement with the organization, the outcomes that the different attitudes of the employees they have for the individual and the organizational outcomes, right? And how the individuals certain behaviors, they can lead them to increase in their organizational citizenship behaviors, their job performance, and we know that job performance leads to higher organizational performance, and similarly the organizational citizenship behaviors, they also are reported to lead to higher overall organizational effectiveness, right? So the organizations in which the employees, they perform better, more organizational citizenship behaviors, they are reported to be more effective compared to the organizations where OCB is not performed that much, right? So all these different attitudes of the employees, they have certain behavioral implications, and those behavioral implications are important not only at the individual level but at the organizational level as well. And when we say that they're important at the organizational level, it means that the HRD interventions, they should be devised in ways that those behaviors are effective, and they are designed, the interventions are designed in the way that behavioral modifications are made in ways that can be aligned, that the individual behavior can be aligned with the organizational goals and the organizational strategies, right? So the organizational policies, the practices, they should be devised in ways that they consider the different employees, their needs of the different employees, the attitudes of the different employees, the motivations of the different employees, right? How they will behave, and in what ways, what are the desired ways of behavior, and how they can make the employees more productive and more effective towards the organization. Right, so this was very interesting topic. I conclude this topic now. I hope you enjoyed this lecture. I thank you very much for your patient hearing. Allah Hafiz.